Everyone, this is Nikachu, Merfolk Master, and today we have a very special guest today. We have Francisco, Amulet Titan Master, with us. He's going to give us the insights to Amulet Titan, how to play it at a competitive level, and give us the in-depth knowledge about the inner workings of how this deck works. And if you love these in-depth interviews to make you a much better Modern Magic player, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel. So thank you very much for joining us, Francisco, also known as fpawlusz.
Yeah, that's actually the best I've heard anyone pronounce that. So nice, congratulations.
It sounds good. It rolls off the tongue perfectly.
I know, easy, right? Yeah, thank you so much. Love to be here, and yeah, hopefully we can enlighten some new folks into the world that is Amulet.
And yeah, the way Amulet Titan is like exploding in popularity. It's seeing a lot of results, especially on the SCG Open, and certainly we're going to want to hear your opinions about that. And if you want to follow Francisco, check the description below. He's a streamer, YouTuber. He's on Twitter. He's all over the place. If you want the insights to Amulet Titan on a regular basis, this is the person you want to follow. So let's start off with, why play Amulet Titan? What's special about this? Why are we playing Amulet Titan?
Yeah, I mean, that's a solid question. I mean, basically, I've been playing Amulet since Pro Tour Born of the Gods, which I think was 2013 or something. Mm-hmm. So it's been a while. And it's been like 6 years maybe, and I am still every single bit in love with the deck, if not even more. The deck is extremely rewarding. It's very, very, very fun. And you just have so many options. I have a very strong affinity towards decks that make me feel like all my decisions matter. Mm-hmm. And I am a big fan of toolbox style decks, where you have access to all of these toolboxes, where you always have the correct tool for the job. You just need to know what those tools are. You need to know how to use those tools, and then you're gonna get the job done. And I actually made a 3-hour video talking about specifically this for Amulet, like the how we actually build the deck in order to to idolize these toolboxes, because we don't only have one toolbox with Amulet, we have 3. And this is a very common misconception about the deck. When you first see the deck, when you first play about Amulet, you do remember those matches where they played an Amulet on turn 1 and Asus on turn 2, and then you died on turn 3 to a hasty Primeval Titan. Those are the matches that you remember, and you're like, this deck is busted, this is a broken combo deck, this is so mindless, blah, 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 blah. In reality, that is like 20% of the games you actually play. Because in the rest of the matches, you actually have interaction, not only from the other side, but also from your side. And you need to know how to best maximize that interaction and how to best play around that interaction. And that's when the toolboxes come in. We have, first of all, a land toolbox, which is the most important one, which is enabled by Primeval Titan. We have a ton of lands. We have a ton of possibilities. We have cards like Radium Fountain, to gain life, Colony Garden and Field of the Dead to start creating token and building a battlefield. We have a bunch of like one-offs, like Cavern of Souls, Ghost Squatter. So we have a ton of tools. We also have access to Tolaria West, which is another engine card. Yeah. Tolaria West basically is this one of the main reasons why the deck actually exists, basically, because that's the key to the engine. When you can play a Primeval Titan and that Primeval Titan has the ability to go get another Primeval Titan, that's where the real strength of the deck really shows. When you're not only facing 1 6/6, but you're actually facing 4 6/6s. Those are much harder to beat than just the one. So there really is a ton to talk about. So the land toolbox is the first one. Then we have the creature toolbox, which is enabled by Summoner's Pact, which conveniently enough, Tolaria West can transmute to go get Summoner's Pact. So that's just good deck building right there. That's what that is. But once we have Summoner's Pact, we get access to a bunch of green creatures. So we have stuff like our ramp cards like Azusa and Sakura Tribe Scout. We have Primeval Titan itself, of course. We have Rurik Thar against Storm decks, now the Ursa PO decks as well. Yep. Reclamation Sage to destroy enchantments, mainly Blood Moon. Blood Moon's pretty good against Amulet, in case you were wondering. It is. Now we actually have access to new tools thanks to Modern Horizons, like Collector Oof, for example. That's a pretty good one. I've been testing Manglehorn lately against the Ursa PO decks. Mixed results, but basically we have like a ton of options, and that's going to be our second toolbox. And then the last toolbox is going to be the artifact toolbox, or I guess that I call it the interaction toolbox, which is where you can you can use Tolaria West to transmute for stuff like Engineered Explosives, Walking Ballista, and even Pact of Negation or Slaughter Pact. So we have all of these toolboxes. Then, if you also are like me and you're a maniac and you really love toolboxes, you can also play Karn the Great Curator, which enables yet another toolbox.
More toolboxes.
Because 3 toolboxes wasn't enough, so now we have 4. Sweet. So as you can see, the deck it has a ton of options. It has so many options, and a lot of those they start with deck building. Like how you build your 75 is extremely important. And it's one of the reasons why you see, there's always the same guys doing well in the SCG Tour, right? You always see Edgar, Dom Harvey, Daryl Ayers, Matt Dilks, Will Pulliam. Those are the guys that you always see doing well in the SCG Tour. And the reason is they are always tuning. They are always figuring out, okay, so this is the deck that I expect to see a ton of this weekend. How do we beat it? We saw Will Pulliam play 2 Obstinate Baloth this past weekend in the sideboard of his Amulet deck. We saw him play Second Fill of the Dead in the sideboard. All of these card choices are extremely important and are going to, this is how you play Amulet. This is how you play Amulet to the highest level. You build your deck precisely to beat what you expect to face, and you can metagame pretty extremely. Even when at GP Vegas, I actually played Amulet in the main event, and I was expecting to see a ton of Hogak. So what I did is I built my entire 75 to beat Hogak. That was
like
my
everyone
goal.
did.
Exactly. Ended up still lost to it one match, but I ended up going 3-1 against it. When everybody thought that Amulet was unplayable, but it's not that the deck is unplayable. It's just that people are lazy and they are not willing to put in the work and think and try to figure out, okay, so these are the key cards. These are the key interactions that are going to happen in the Hogak matchup. I realized on stream that Field of the Dead was actually the key card in the matchup. So I tried to add it to the main deck. I was playing 29 lands, like a bunch of very specific interactions, basically made in order to beat Hogak, and it ended up working out. So it really is exciting because of this. The deck is forever changing. New cards get printed consistently. Lately, Castle Garenbrig and Once Upon a Time are the 2 biggest additions from Throne of Eldraine, and those, especially Once Upon a Time, has truly reinvigorated the deck. And just again, more testing, more new decisions, more ways to build the deck, how to try to find the perfect machine that is going to beat everything that your opponents are doing.
Seeing as it's a toolbox deck and you've got so many tutors to find exactly what you want, it sounds like the ceiling to Amulet is maybe the sky's the limit, because because you have access to basically all cards, and you only need like a little one of this and that, and you can just grab it whenever you want.
Exactly, and that's a big part of it. And one really fun thing about Amulet, which I don't know if this also happens with other decks like Merfolk and stuff, is Amulet is a deck that has a little the Amulet players, we call it the Amulet box, the Amulet deck box. So basically in your Amulet deck box, you want cards like Chameleon Colossus, Cursor of Crufix. These are cards that are like super specific, and you're only going to be playing like one copy of them in like a very specific metagame. Like when Grixis Shadow was the deck to beat, Chameleon Colossus was a house there.
Right.
And
Pro Black.
I remember exactly. I remember just all the time, just like if I got to turn 4, if I had 4 mana in place, just like, hey, pack for Chameleon Colossus, go. And my opponents were like, well,
guess I lose. Guess I die.
Shadow. Yeah, I have a Death Shadow, I guess, but I can't do anything, so pass to you. So it's really this is what I try to stress to new Amulet players is like the deck is always evolving. There's always new things to try, and you always want to be tuning your deck to beat what you expect to face. You don't want to grab like if you grab Will's list from this past weekend and you play it like 2 weeks from now. The metagame might have probably shifted. Maybe people figure out how to play Ursa and you're not going to face as much Ursa. Well, then maybe you don't want to be playing a Manglehorn in your sideboard. You know what I'm saying? So these are the kind of decisions that really matter with a deck like Amulet.
It's actually very similar to Merfolk. We actually call it the tackle box. But the deck is very customizable. A card like Tidebinder Mage can be put in the main deck to fight off green creatures, red creatures, aggressive, fast metagames. But it will be completely useless in your control metagame, for example, or even against Grixis Shadow decks. So the archetypes are very similar in that you can't just look at one particular list and say that that's definitely going to work in your metagame. These are decks that you have to make the customizations yourself. Learn what do you play to meet what metagame.
Exactly. Know what works for what, and then use that. Build your deck to maximize that.
So in general, what do you think are the strengths of Amulet Titan? We've got the customization, but like, what is the general strengths of the deck and weaknesses?
Okay, so basically, what I really like about Amulet is that it's funny because it's a very robust deck in that you are playing like 28 or 29 lands. So clearly missing land drops is not what you want to be doing. But you have the tools to try to either ramp. That's going to be where Sakura Tribe Scout and Azusa really come into play. Amulet is it's a weird kind of like pseudo ramp, I guess. But it works. It works in some situations. Like by itself, it doesn't really ramp you by that much. Amulet is more of what warrants you the explosiveness, basically. And Castle, to one extent, represents like a little bit of ramp, which is a new addition to the deck. The Castle Garen Brig. So you basically want to make it to 6 mana as quickly as possible. And you have ways to kind of stall a little bit. So you have cards like, as I was saying earlier, Carnley Garden, Radium Fountain. These are the cards that allow you to bridge the gap. Engineered Explosives also fits the bill. So we have 2 ways to kind of like bridge into the mid-game. Which try to get to 6 mana. That's what I call the mid game, basically. And once you get there, and once you get to cast your Primeval Titan, with which you're playing a virtual 11 copies of, you have the 4 actual Titans, so you have the 4 packs, and you have the 3 Tolaria Wests that you can use to transmute for the pact in order to search for the Titan. So we actually have there's a lot of
Once the chain starts, it doesn't stop. I know that.
Exactly. So. Once you get your Titan, that's when the game actually starts. Because once the Titan resolves, that's where all your options really open up, and that's when experience really comes into play. Because you can try to go for the combo route. Which would be to get a Boros Garrison and Slayer Stronghold, which whenever you have an Amulet in play, they will trigger when they enter the battlefield, and then you can actually haste your Titan and give it +2/+0. And then you actually have Sandhome as well. I didn't talk about this. Sandhome, Fortress of the Legion, which for red, white, and 2, you can tap it to give you a target creature double strike. So that is kind of like your combo finish, I always say that Amulet it's a toolbox deck with a combo finish. This is the combo finish that we're talking about here, and then what it does that I think it's very how can I say it's very underappreciated. And where I think that most of the power of Amulet comes into play is that it is so resilient. Unless you're playing like a Blood Moon or something like that, Amulet will kill you. Mm-hmm. You have a card liberated, I don't care. I will kill that card. This Titan will get another Titan. You can play we can play Wormcoil Engine, I don't care. I will still attack. You have a better late game than Tron does, which I think is insane. Mm-hmm. You not only can kill on turn 2 with your really nut draws, because there is actually a potential turn 2 kill. It always involves double Amulet. It's not like the old days. It's not like the old days with Summer Bloom, where you could you could get away with some. Yeah, Summer Bloom was not okay, but it really wasn't. But basically, you have access to a potential turn 2 kill if you're really, really lucky. But you can even brawl in the late game with decks like Tron, which is just insane because of this engine that I was talking about. When you have the Titan Tolari West Bounce Land engine, the bounce line comes into play. It returns your Tolari West to hand, so you can transmute it, which means that every Titan that you get is basically a Squadron Hawk, except it's a 6/6 trample instead of a 1/1.
Right.
So it's better.
And it tutors. Well, I guess the Squadron Hawk tutors, but this one tutors for bigger things.
Oh yeah. So it's very the late game favors you under most circumstances. Basically, you need a very interesting set of board states for the late game not to be in your favor. So that is personally, I think, the biggest strength of the deck. The fact that you can switch gears and you can be so good at different things, basically. So that is I think the main strength of the deck, and why we see it being so powerful right now, because cards like Once Upon a Time have done a lot to fix the deck's main issue, which was I don't want to say consistency, but I'm going to say consistency anyway.
Sure.
Because
it wasn't consistent enough. Yeah, it was already consistent, but we could even use more.
Exactly. So basically, it's the same consistency as a burn deck. The burn deck is consistent because older cards do the same. Mm-hmm. Amulet is consistent because you have a ton of copies of the one card that you need, and then if you draw it, you win. Basically, right? If I actually have viewers, a friend of mine that watches my stream, and all the time he says, "I heard you say, well, if I draw a Titan, I win," so many times on stream, and that's basically how it feels a lot of the time. You are just you're always trying to set yourself up to take the most out of your draw steps, and if you draw that one card, you go from 0 to 100, basically. Which is different, and this is what really draws some people away of the deck, is because when you're playing Jund, you are turn 1 you Inquisition your opponent, turn 2 you play your Tarmogoyf, turn 3 you call against command something, and then you died on turn 4. Mm-hmm. But you felt like you did stuff. You feel like you interacted. You were playing. You were attacking with your 4/5. You were doing stuff. Here with Amulet, it doesn't feel like that sometimes. Sometimes it feels like, okay, land drop, prolong the game. Try to play this land instead of this one, because this will make sure that I have more potential draw steps that are going to be great for me. That kind of stuff. And then if I draw this card, I'm going to kill you. Okay, I didn't draw it, but I was literally one card away from you being dead and me winning. And that is just a different approach, Mm-hmm. It's it's a different way of playing Magic, and something that, as an Amulet player is good to get used to, and to not get frustrated by. Because it's a numbers game in the end. The numbers do favor you. If you have if you have 40 cards in your deck and you have 11 possible top decks that are going to win you the game on the spot, Now with Once Upon a Time, we actually have potentially 15. So that is kind of like a big deal, you know. Like we actually brought that number a little bit higher even. So I have like all these possible draw steps to just win the game, and then you whiff anyway. It's fine, you know. You just move on with your life. Exactly, and it's okay, and it's something that you need to, you know, get familiar with. But a lot of people get frustrated by their stuff. They would rather draw like a lightning bolt or something and feel like they're doing something, except the card is just like not doing anything, but still.
Yeah.
But that is kind of like the, you know, something that drives people away from the deck. That I think it's fine. I don't think that the deck is for everybody. I think that you need to have, you know, a mindset and like a way to approach the game that is specific, and the deck needs to click. You know, it's one of those things that the deck needs to click with you, and if it's something that you're doing, it's something that you enjoy doing, it's going to really click. That's what happened to me. Like people that play Amulet are very passionate about the deck. People that play Amulet are either hardcore lovers or they want nothing to do with the deck, and that's fine. That's fine.
What about the complexity to picking up this deck? How long does it take until you are a reasonable player? Because when Summer Bloom came out, like we're talking like when Amulet really came onto the scene in the Summer Bloom era, I saw a lot of people playing the Amulet deck, but very badly, and I would say the numbers didn't convert to the amount of people that I saw. That quantity of number of people did not convert into any results, and I'm sure they just abandoned it. So, how big of a barrier is picking up the deck from scratch?
That's a good question actually, and I think it's one that it's a little bit overstated. Mm-hmm. I don't think the deck is as hard as people say it is. Like as KCI was hard, you know. Mm-hmm. KCI, the interactions themselves were very weird, you know. So it's not like, you know, the deck itself was just hard, you know. It's kind of weird in that sense. Amulet is not like that. You just have to, as I was saying, you have to get familiar with just playing the deck playing Magic in a different way, basically. Same thing as, you know, Dredge plays the game in a different way.
Sure.
You know, it's kind of like interesting. These are kind of decks that play Magic in a different way. It's not like make my land drop, play my thing, you know, or like it's not that how we play. The way that we play is, whenever I play, and I always tell people this, is when you see your opening hand, what you want to be thinking is about turn 3 or 4. Mm-hmm. You know? Okay, so I have this hand. This hand is incredible if I draw one of my 9 bounce lands, okay? Or 8 bounce lands. So what are my chances of drawing these bounce lands? Okay, so these are my chances. Okay, so if I draw this, I can play this land first, then I can play this other land, which would allow me to, if I draw this bounce land, I win on turn 3.
Right.
You know, these are the kind of things that you want to be thinking of, and this is not really normal. You know, this is not usually the way that we play Magic. This is not the way that we play Limited. You know, so that is, I think, the main barrier. When you're talking about the deck like Boggles or Tron, you know, those decks are way more straightforward. So the floor is probably, you know, 50%, you know, and then the top Boggles player in the world, let's say, like, actually the floor in Boggles is probably like 75 or something, and then the top Boggles in the top Boggles player in the world is gonna play it at like, you know, 90 or something, you know. So you have like 75 and 90. That is like the gap between the worst Boggles player and the best Boggles player. The gap between the worst Amulet player is a 20%.
Okay.
And in 98%. You see, because this is something like auto-piloting with the deck is just not a thing. You know?
It's not going to happen. You got to make your calculations.
Exactly. You're just not going to win. And you're going to say, oh, you know, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to say, oh, this deck sucks, and et cetera, et cetera. But in the end, I'm going to, you know, if you show me your opening hand, and you tell me, yeah, I did this, I'm like, well, you made a mistake on turn 1. You play the wrong land, and then you drew something that you could have drawn, and you didn't play to that out. You know what I'm saying? You could have played to that out if you had thought about it for a second, but then you didn't, and now you lost the tempo, and instead of having a turn 3 Titan that would have won the game, you have a turn 4 Titan that loses. So these are the kind of things that really show the difference between an experienced Amulet player and a new Amulet player. And this has a lot to do with knowing the potential of the deck and what you need to happen in order to get you there, basically.
So what I'm gathering from this conversation with you is there's a lot of game theory optimal plays that you have to make based on, based on the probability of you drawing your outs. Like you're constantly playing to your outs, not playing to what's inside not necessarily playing to what's inside your hand.
Exactly. No, yeah. So you're actually doing both, right? So
I'm sure you have to leverage both.
Exactly, and this is yet another thing that is very interesting. Is you need to know when to do this stuff. You need to know. Okay, so with this hand that I have, this happens a lot with cards like Fulminator Mage, for example. How do I sequence my lands in order to play around my opponent having exactly Fulminator Mage on turn 3? Can I beat Fulminator Mage on turn 3?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, how do I need to sequence my lands? If I cannot afford to play around Fulminator Mage, you need to know how to measure these risks. You need to know how to, play around these risks and when you can afford to and when you can't afford to. And, and of course, as I was saying, what needs to happen off the top of the deck in order for you to win the deck and then play to that. Sometimes it's something as like bouncing the wrong land on turn 2. Because if instead of bouncing that land on turn 2, you would have like played a Colony Guard and then replayed it 2 turns later, you would have bought yourself 1 extra turn.
Mm-hmm.
You see? And maybe that 1 extra turn was exactly the card that you needed to draw to get there. So these are the kind of things that the experienced Amulet player will do and the novice Amulet player won't. And even sometimes stuff like holding a bounce land in hand. Sometimes you will see Amulet players, on turn 2 or turn 3, they will play a bounce land triggered with Amulet and like play something, and then they will return the bounce land to their hand, effectively missing their land drop, right? Like the amount of meta that they have in play
right.
is the same after making their land drop.
Yeah.
But maybe they are playing to the potential out of top decking either an Azusa or another Amulet or something like that, and if they do that, then you're dead. Versus, something like, okay, I'm going to develop my mana, and then they do top deck the card that they were looking for, and now they lost instead of winning the game. So these are the kind of things that the experienced Amulet player will do, or at least will think about, and will try to maximize. And that is, what's going to make the difference between what I was telling you, like the 90% and the 20%,
Okay, so after knowing the strengths and weaknesses of the Amulet deck, what are the good and bad matchups to Amulet?
Basically, the good stuff for us are, Merfolk is actually a very, very good matchup because we play 3 Engineered Explosives in the 75 usually, and the 3 Tolaria Wests, every Titan basically gets explosives. And just Cavern of Souls, it's pretty good against Merfolk too.
It's not bad. So yeah, I've learned to counter the Summoner's Pact. Merfolk is a good matchup.
Boggles. Yeah, exactly. That's actually something that good Merfolk players will do. Sometimes, you will pact in order to bait them, and they will counter the pact, and you're like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, I know if I let it resolve, the Cavern of Souls is coming down.
Exactly. So that is the kind of things that you want to be watching out for from the Merfolk side. Boggles is another really good matchup. Again, explosives. It's a house there. So
basically, anything explosives blows up.
Exactly, because you just have so many ways to get access to explosives. Even like Steerings gets you explosives. So the deck has very reliable access to engineered explosives. So those are what I would consider like some of the top matchups. Then stuff like mid-range decks that don't play Lydiana of the Veil are very good. So if you're playing against some like, I don't even know, like blue-black deck or like control decks. Control decks are actually very interesting because those are probably like the most skill-intensive matchups. I consider them to be very good, but it depends a lot on your level and your opponent's level. So a lot of that is going on there, But I consider the control matchups to be good for us. Again, all the mid-range decks. What else? I feel like I'm missing a really, really good matchup that I can't really think of. But
maybe a certain combo deck?
That's I don't think so. Usually, like fast combo decks are bad matchups. Actually, going to the bad matchups. So like Infect, Storm, those can be rough. Ursa, I think it's good, but the PO version of Ursa is actually bad. So it's kind of weird in that sense. Like
Okay.
the two decks actually play very differently against Amulet.
They most definitely do.
Yeah. So I feel pretty favored against the Thopter Sword combo decks version of Ursa, but I feel very unfavored against the PO decks. Then Mel is actually one of our absolute worst matchups, which is really funny to say, but Mel is pretty much unbeatable, which is hilarious because Archetype Trap is just GG's.
Oh yeah, that's right. Boom.
Summoner's Pact, Tolaria West, Primeval Titan. It's insane. Like one of the craziest things I've done against Mel was play Primeval Titan and fail to not use the trigger. That is the only circumstance in which I've said no, decline.
No, we're not doing this.
Exactly, decline to use the trigger. My opponent, it was like turn 3 and they hadn't played a single like Mel card, and I'm like, yeah, you probably have like 2 or 3 Archive Traps in there.
It's all Archive Traps.
Yeah, and I beat them just by swinging for 6. I attacked 3 times, never fetched, and I got there that way. I know, it's hilarious. But we tutor a lot, so Archive Trap is rough. Main deck Surgical Extraction, that's also pretty rough. Well, any deck with Blood Moon is a big problem. I didn't talk about the actual problematic cards, and the problematic cards are Blood Moon is like it's on a tier of its own. That's absolutely the best possible card that you can play against Amulet. Like there's bar none, that card actually wins the game.
You should be pretty happy it's not really like I don't see it at all right now.
Oh, I'm very happy that's the case.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the main reasons why Amulet has been doing so well lately. It's like people are just not playing Blood Moon, which is like the main bane of the deck. People are playing Damping Sphere, which is good. It's good against Amulet, but way more beatable. Because giving Amulet access to the colored mana, it's a pretty big deal. And it's harder, but I can still cast my spells under a Damping Sphere, whereas I really cannot under a Blood Moon. Right. So instead of playing a Titan on turn 3, I'm probably going to play it on turn 5. But if you're not clocking me, you're going to die to my turn 5 Titan. It's just the way it's going to go. You need to clock me at the same time. You can't just like play a Damping Sphere and be like, oh, nice. GG's. I'm like, well, no. Here's a 6/6. Can you beat this?
Yeah.
And very often
a Titan is still a Titan.
Exactly. Very often times it's just like, well, no, I can't. So I die. And this is, that is actually a very, very common misconception. I've had people like mulligan to like turn to Damping Sphere. I've played against, decks like Jund or like the green-white Eldrazi decks where my opponent mulls to 5 and then they go like turn to Damp Sphere. And I'm like, sure, whatever. Play my lands. It's turn 6. There's a 6/6.
It's just like Tron, really, the way they look at things like Blood Moon and Damping Sphere. Just one land drop at a time, and all of a sudden, Wormcoil Engine.
Exactly. Except like the difference with Tron is like Blood Moon actually really hits you. Because we only play either between 3 or 4 basic forests. Because basically playing any other basic it's strictly wrong in my opinion. But we play only a couple of basics, and we even when we do a lot of the power. One thing to know of is like under a Damping Sphere, I can transmute to Laria West. I can return lands to my hand if I need to. I still gain life off of Radium Fountain. I get my token from Field of the Dead and Colony Garden. All of those things are still happening. Mm-hmm. So I can still play a game of Magic under a Damping Sphere. I cannot do that under a Blood Moon. All my lands are basically blanked. So that is the big difference between both cards, and why Blood Moon is just like a huge haymaker, and Damping Sphere is just like, sure. Right. So that's a very big difference. But there are decks like, for example, Titan Shift. Titan Shift I consider to be a very good matchup, but that is one deck where Damping Sphere is at its best, because cards like Rex Sage or a Braid, I am as the Amulet player, I'm forced into bringing all of these very bad cards against your deck, and your deck is going to play Damping Sphere on 2 or 3, and it's going to clock me, right? Because they are going to eventually find their Titans. So it's very interesting. It's very interesting in that sense, and it's important for you as my opponent, basically. So for you facing Amulet, for you to be aware of these things, because it's very easy. Again, as I'm telling you right now, it's like people really overvalue cards like Damping Sphere and stuff. Okay. And then they just die with like a Damping Sphere in play, or they use a bunch of resources in order to get the Damping Sphere in play, and then they just lose anyway, and they wonder why. Also, you can EE on 2 under a Damping Sphere, and you can't EE on 3 under a Blood Moon. That's another big one too. That's a big difference. So it's pretty hard to get rid of the Blood Moon, and it's pretty easy to get rid of the Damping Sphere if I need to. But yeah, so those are like the big problematic cards, and then everything else is just a matter of context.
Right.
I actually had somebody on my Discord the other day was asking like, what is better against us, and they were saying Damping Sphere, Liliana, Thoughtseize, or something else. I'm like, there's no way I can answer this question, because everything is entirely up to, it depends 100% on the context, basically. There's no absolutes, right? There's no absolutes whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And it's like, does your opponent have a board state? What is your hand? Like, what are you, what can you beat? What can't you beat? How can you sequence your lines in order to play around stuff like Liliana? All that. Sometimes you can use bounce lands to like return bad lands to your hand in order to feed to Liliana. Can you afford to do that kind of stuff? And these are all questions that are basically on a game-to-game basis, right? Like there's no absolutes to this. So it's very cool that besides Blood Moon, there's no like one card way to beat Amulet. You can basically pivot, and you can try to, you can change your play patterns, change your sequencing, and like adapt to most everything. It's very flexible in that sense, and it has to do with the toolbox aspect of it.
All right, so from that, knowing the strengths and weaknesses and its toolbox, what is making it so well positioned right now? Like the big decks that seem to have come out on top are Burn, which I understand is a very good matchup for you, probably on the back of just Radiant Fountain and just putting it in play a million times. We also have the different versions of Urza, both the Thopter Sword version is still there, the Urza deck, but then we also have the Urza Paradox deck, and then we're getting a bunch of big mana decks like Tron and Titan Shift, very big in the metagame right now. What makes Amulet so good right now that it's putting up a lot of results on SCG and also online?
Yeah, well, one of the things that has it well positioned is, first of all, the addition of consistency, and second of all, something that we already talked about, and this is something that we figured out with Will. We figured out over we were messaging on Twitter, and we're like thinking of the card Disdainful Stroke. We just went down and we started thinking, wait a second, like we have 2 negates in the sideboard, but the main card that we want to get rid of is Urza right now. Okay, what does Disdainful Stroke also counter? Well, it counters Primeval Titan. It counters Scapeshift. It
Yeah.
counters Karn. It counters Wormcoil. It counters. I don't think that your Tron opponent should bring in Thragtusk, but it counters that too.
It counters Thragtusk.
It counters Cryptic Command. So we were realizing that all the stuff that we wanted to counter was actually countered by Disdainful Stroke instead of Negate. Because the PO is also tagged by the Disdainful Stroke. So I think that first of all, the main thing that has it well positioned is the players. The players metagaming and the players making decisions and adapting their deck to what they expect to face. So the Disdainful Stroke tech has been an all-star. And this, okay. I don't remember if Matt Dilks played it last weekend, so like the previous weekend, I guess, on the Team Open. I can't remember that, but I know that Will played it this past weekend on his second place finishing deck. So the Disdainful Stroke tech has been very important. That is something that I actually started testing on stream like before I went on a trip, so a week and a half ago. 2 weeks ago almost. But yeah, it really worked out. It really worked out. So that's the first thing that has the deck well positioned. Second of all, besides the PO decks, I feel favored against every single deck that you just named. So that is also a big deal. And again, Disdainful Stroke is a concession to the fact that we are trying to target the PO deck.
The PO right? deck and all the other big mana decks playing big mana spells. Exactly. So being able to counter a Primeval Titan with Disdainful Stroke was just a massive like light bulb moment, you know. So that is I think one of the big reasons why the deck is so well positioned right now, and now that it's starting to pick up some steam, you know, I expect you know, everything to change in terms of like what people are going to be trying. I started trying splashing some new colors. For example, I started splashing red for Rurik Thar. I had been splashing a Braid, but that was before the Castle Garen break. There's a ton of like mana base considerations that we would need to take into account. So that is you know, always a constant, you know, it's a constant trial and error. Basically, you know, you're like trying this card out, see what happens, see how it plays out. Oh, it doesn't. Okay, so then we'll revert back to this other thing, and that is most of what I do on stream. You know, it's just like, okay, we're trying to figure out how to beat this, or we're trying to test this card and see how it fares against this other deck, and just do it. You know, just fire up a league and just try those cards and see what happens. And that is how we have come into all of these, you know, conclusions and how we've made all these innovations. But that's the only way. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that you can explain about the burn matchup, because I think a lot of people on the surface, they'll just assume, well, what's the problem? We're just gonna go overtop the Amulet player with all these burn spells and then kill them very quickly. But in actuality, burn players with experience realize this matchup is impossible. So what is it that the Amulet deck has that, you know, is just a huge barrier to burn even getting anything going?
Well, the big deal is most of all it's player experience, and I have developed this over literally years of playing against burn and noticing patterns. For example, one of the main patterns is I very rarely, if ever, lose to their burn heavy hands. When I lose to burn is when they have multiple creatures early in the game.
Okay.
So when I sideboard against burn, for example, I don't bring in stuff like Negate or Spell Pierce. I think those are a waste of a slot. What I do bring in is stuff like a Braid and like Path to Exile if I'm splashing white, that kind of stuff. So that is one big difference. And coming to speaking of the same thing, really, is the fact that burn cannot really answer a Resolve Primeval Titan, right? And a Resolve Primeval Titan is basically going to gain between 2 and 6 life, depending on whether I have access to Azusa as well, and that is huge.
Yeah, of course.
That is just
that's 2
massive.
cards from their hand.
Exactly. That is just massive. So if your burn opponent doesn't kill you that quickly, they're going to lose, because you're just going to have a 6/6 that they can't answer, and they're just going to die to it. So it's pretty straightforward in that sense. So what we see is players, burn players that is, bringing cards like Path to Exile and Deflecting Palm. Two cards that burn players always bring in. And what happens is my opponent has 2 cards in hand, and I'm at 6 or 3 life, and I am just not dead with them having 2 cards in hand. And then I play a Primeval Titan. Mm-hmm. And then I gain some life. And now my opponent didn't do anything. And I'm like, oh, okay, so I guess that's what's going on. So they will go ahead and path my Titan, And then I won't attack with the Titan because I kind of know for a fact that they have a Deflecting Palm in hand. So I never attack with the Titan until I have actually transmuted for a Pact of Negation.
To counter the Deflecting Palm.
Exactly. So at that point, if my opponent, instead of having a path and the Deflecting Palm had like 2 Lava Spikes or whatever it is that they cybered out, I would have been dead. Right? But instead they gave me time. And because they gave me time, I am able to stabilize. And if I stabilize, they are going to lose. That's pretty much the way that it goes. And this happens a lot, really. This happens a lot, and this is what I'm saying about like matchup experience. A lot of Amulet players are like, yeah, Pact of Negation, that's like an easy cut. It's just like, no, it's the complete opposite. That's the card that you need, because your opponent will be doing this thing. So how do we play around this thing? Well, you just leave the card in your deck, and that's fine. They can never. I think I've only been gotten by Deflecting Palm once in my life.
Once.
You
hear that, Day 2 Dryden? He only got once. Not worth bringing in.
No, I really don't think so. And I always recommend burn players, don't bring in Path to Exile. Don't bring in these cards. Leaving your burn and leaving cards like Searing Blood and Searing Blaze are actually somewhat legit. Smash the Smith Rings, I don't think I would. If I were playing burn, I wouldn't want to bring in more than 1. Maybe 2 at most, but that's too risky because it's the same thing. I don't need the amulet to win. Mm-hmm. And again, this is one of the things that you pick up with experience. It's like your opponent has 2 cards in hand. Well, they could have like a path and a smash to Smitherings, or like a Deflecting Palms and a smash. So you're staring at the amulet in your hand and you just don't play it.
Yeah.
Easy.
I've done the same thing with Aether Vial.
Exactly. And that's such a big deal. That's such a big deal because those 3 damage are the difference between your opponent winning the game and them losing. So these are the kind of things that you pick up, and you start to realize, okay, so I can afford to do this right now. You play your amulet on turn 1, but you don't play it on turn 2, because if they smash it on turn 2, that means that they are not playing their Eidolon. So these are all the thought processes that I go by. That I go through actually when I'm playing the burn matchup, and I think it's very, very important to do this kind of thing because this is how you get the percentages. This is how you make the difference, and this is why you turn burn into a good matchup. If you bring like your average burn player versus your average amulet player, maybe the average burn player will beat the average amulet player just a consistent amount of the time. Just maybe over 50%. Now, when you bring in the experienced amulet player against the experienced burn player, then things are edging towards the amulet player. And if it's the other way around, it's just like it's very unfair. Playing against non-good burn players is too easy. Like if your opponent uses a lightning bolt to kill your scout, you're like, okay, this is gonna be an easy match.
So we discussed burn. And you said, well, the paradoxical outcome version of Urza is not very good. Then what? So for at least the matchup that is good, the Wurza Thopter Foundry, sort of the Meek deck. What would you suggest is the plan in that matchup for Amulet players that are going to be facing that right now in the metagame?
Basically, the key in that matchup is going to be engineered explosives, and this is one of the concessions that we made with the latest lists that have been coming up, which is we're only playing one explosive in the main deck as opposed to the two explosives that were often played before. So that is kind of a big difference, really. And it has definitely, brought the percentage a little bit lower. However, we are adding inconsistency. So playing your early Titans, it's just gonna be easy, basically. As long as you don't get comboed out. That's the rule. If you don't get comboed out, you're going to win. Damping Sphere can be a little bit annoying sometimes with some hands, but again, the same thing that we were talking about. If your opponent is not pressuring you, you don't really care. Eventually, you're going to get two explosives on two, and it's going to be game over.
Right.
The Rex Age in the main deck is going to be almost exclusively saved for Ensnaring Bridge. That's kind of like a big deal. That's one of the ways that they can stall you, especially if you've already used your explosives and then you can't really win anymore. So that's something that you need to be very careful with. And yeah, I mean, as long as you deal with the Ursa, you should be fine. And yeah, when I say combo off, I mean going infinite. I don't mean like making a bunch of Thopters. We can, again, explosives
Real
easily
infinite.
Exactly. Explosives very easily beats a bunch of Thopters, but we cannot beat the infinite combo, right? So that's what I'm talking about there. Bojuku Bog can be randomly relevant if they are on the
Goblin
Engineer, thank you. If they're on the Goblin Engineer version and they are running like multiple copies of that, maybe they will get greedy and they will fetch the bridge with the Engineer trigger and then you can bog it away. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of like little plays that can definitely turn the matchup in your favor. But in the end, again, I feel very favored unless I get infinite comboed.
Right. So why play Amulet over Tron? Why play Amulet over Titan Shift? And like I've heard from other experienced pros like Sam Black, he described Amulet he described it as actually a better Tron deck. But why exactly would you play it over these other archetypes?
Because it's fun. It really is a ton of fun. I see myself playing much better Amulet than literally any other deck, because when I'm doing it, I'm having an absolute blast. Every single turn, I'm going through all these permutations in my head. I'm thinking all this stuff. It keeps me, keeps me on my toes all the time. It's not like, okay, play my land, play my ramp spell, go fetch, shuffle.
Right, yeah.
It's just like there's no nuances. Exactly. It's just boring. Does it win consistently? Yes. But it's just boring. And it's what I'm telling you about between the difference. Like once you get to a competent level of Amulet, the deck it's very powerful. I think that since the Hogak ban, you can actually go through all my VODs between when Hogak got banned and the release of Once Upon a Time, where I was testing Karn the Great Creator. I was really going deep and trying to get to the best possible Karn list that I could. And I had a viewer of mine actually did the math, and I had a 78.67 win rate over 2 months. So that's a long time to have a
good.
To have an almost 80% win rate. I think it's been tier 1 for a really long time, but it's what you were saying. People are kind of like afraid of it, or they are lured in by these other, very blown out of proportion combo decks like the Ursa deck or stuff like that, or simply they just want to. Maybe they don't play Modern or something, and they are just like, let's find an easy deck that I can learn quickly. Because that's not going to work with Amulet. That's not going to work. It's just like
you got to invest the time.
Yes, 100%. Is it worth it? 100% too. You're not going to get good at Amulet in a couple of. Just like in a couple of hours. You need to put in the time. You need to put in the reps. You need to get familiar with the play patterns. You need to make sure that you know what the capabilities of the deck are. What we were talking about, like what your potential top decks are and what they allow you to do. and you need to change your play patterns in order to maximize that. When you can't maximize your hand, you can always try to maximize the top of your deck, and if you do that, you're going to see way more wins. And personally, I think that Amulet is just more powerful than both Tron and Titan Shift by a fair margin.
All right, so the your experience has certainly paid off for you. For over the 6 years that you've been playing it. What are all your accomplishments actually with Amulet Titan up to this point?
Well, that's a funny question actually, because I'm a musician, so I usually work during the weekends. Mm-hmm. So I don't really get to play many tournaments.
No, the opens, but you're always up there on the trophy leaders board.
Yeah, I play mostly on Moto. I play mostly on Magic Online, but again, like I think I've played in all my life, I played 3 GPs. One was a limited GP in Modern Masters 2015, and 2 Modern GPs. I day 2'd both of them, and I went 10-5 at GPLA earlier this year, and then 10-4-1 at GP Vegas also earlier this year. That was the Hogak, the Hogak metagame that I was talking about earlier. Right. So 100% conversion rate to day 2.
Yeah, there you go.
If that's something. But yeah, mostly what I play, unfortunately, because of my schedule, is just like leagues and stuff. So I don't really have like any like big tournament finishes or anything, mostly because I don't really play any tournaments. Back in the Summer Bloom era, I think I played like a couple of PTQs and stuff, and I top 8'd states. I was in like 2014 or something. It was a long time ago, 2015. And then there was the regionals that I also top 8'd. But that's again, I really don't get to play much Magic before leagues on Moto. And that's one of the main reasons why I started playing Moto in the first place. It's just like I just wasn't playing Magic. I couldn't even go to FNM because I would be working. So that's when I'm like, okay, I mean, the weeks are when I'm free, so I'm going to start playing Magic Online because that's what it allows me to do. And it went from there, one thing, it was just first start playing, then, build a collection, then start streaming. It kind of like, it just happened naturally. Mm-hmm. And I guess it's been working out. It's been working out. I have a beautiful community. The Amulet community is awesome. I imagine, when we have this kind of deck like Amulet or Merfolk that people are so passionate about, the community is always so nice. It's just so welcoming, always willing to learn more and try to figure out, okay, what's the next thing that we can try out, what's the newest deck, always sharing the findings. I've been testing this card and it's been working out like so and so, all that kind of stuff. It's just very nice and warm and rewarding. So I guess that is my greatest accomplishment, I guess, just like being one of
fostering the community.
Exactly, being one of the main proponents of Amulet for now like over a year, I think. Yeah, I started streaming last September, so like a year and 1 or 2 months. So I've been trying to always push the community forward, and that's in
good times and for bad, because I know that you're like basically my only Amulet opponent when everyone thinks Amulet isn't well positioned.
Yeah, I can see that. One thing. Yeah, I guess both Edgar and Will won events with my list. So I guess that is a side effect accomplishment, I guess. The SCG Open that Will Pulliam won, he was actually playing my 75, and I think that, I don't know if the week prior or that, Edgar Magayesh, for those of you that don't know who he is, incredible player. He won a face-to-face invitational, like some face-to-face event over there in Canada with my list as well, and he actually tagged me, tagged me and credited me with the list. So that was cool. That was cool.
Maybe we can finish this off talking about some cards. Let's talk about Once Upon a Time. How obvious that this was going to be a slam dunk card in the Amulet deck?
All right, disclaimer time. I was a naysayer.
Okay. Oh, yeah. There's always some, when Creeping Chill came out, the Drudge players weren't all like, is this really what we want to be doing? It's hard to tell. But
It really was. We hadn't really seen a card like this before, and I thought that people were focusing too much on the upside and they were ignoring the downside. I actually made a full like 30-minute video going over like different permutations of like play patterns that would happen or that were likely to happen. Where Once Upon a Time would actually be very awkward. It wouldn't fit in the curve of the deck, because if you look at the deck before Once Upon a Time, the curve was basically 1, 3, 6.
Yeah.
Right? That is how Amulet's curve looked like. And that's not really a coincidence. That's how the games play out. You play your one drop. On turn 2 you play you either try to play an Azusa or a Scout or something like that, or you play a tapped bounce land. Right? And that is where the awkwardness with Once Upon a Time really happened. During the Hogak altar time, I started testing a version of Amulet using the Devoted Druid, and it was super awkward. Like, it was super awkward because of, I mean, it made sense, right? Like the point made sense, but a lot of the times you had to choose. Okay, if I play Druid here on turn 2, I sequence my lands in order to enable the Druid. I cannot play Azusa on 3.
Yeah.
Right? So you always had like this conflicting thing. Against Hogak, it was pretty easy. You just play the Druid because they couldn't kill it, right? This was with the Altar of Dementia combo, when they just bridged you. And
the original Hogak deck.
Exactly. The first busted deck. Yeah. The first busted version of Hogak. So they couldn't really answer the vote, so it was easy. But then you got paired against John, and you're like, huh. So if they have a Fatal Push or a Bolt,
this is awkward.
They are very likely to have. I basically time walk myself. So it was really awkward. Like, the way that it fit in the curve was just not working out that well. That's why as soon as the Altar of Dementia thing got banned, I immediately abandoned the idea because it really sucked. It was really frustrating. It was great. Like, I was like X and 1 against that specific deck, but I just hated that version of Amulet. It was not great. But so I was expecting Once Upon a Time to be, to be kind of like that. But what I said and what ended up actually happening is, what I said is, I think that the way that this might change the way that I think about this is if I am actually undervaluing the instant speed. And I think that was very true. Being able to play a bounce land, trigger it with Amulet, it untaps, and you can
play it.
And you can play the Once Upon a Time in response to the bounce trigger. That smooths out your sequencing so much, because you have the information of which land you're gonna find of the Once Upon a Time, so you know whether you need to be bouncing the other land or you need to be bouncing the bounce land itself. This is actually something that comes up a lot and really smooths out the way that Once Upon a Time ends up playing out. So not only this, but also, like end step, Once Upon a Time and find the prime time. So now on my turn, I can do all this stuff. I said that this was going to happen. So I was a non-believer, but I said, the way that I could see going up to 4 and 4 being a slum dunk is if I am undervaluing the instant speed, and that's exactly what I did. So now that I'm actually playing with the card and I can see the value of the instant speed and I can, kind of figure out the sequencing and stuff, it really smooths out the deck a fair amount. Like, it really helps the consistency a lot. It's still awkward when you go like turn 1 steerings and then you top deck your Once Upon a Time on turn 2. It's still awkward, but it's definitely much less awkward than I thought it would be originally. So it definitely helps.
So let's move on to the next card in question, Ancient Stirrings. Now, this card, for quite a few years now, is starting to pick up a lot of heat. Not enough that, I don't think it's in any danger of being banned, but it has picked up enough heat that Wizards of the Coast officially said, we're paying very close attention to Ancient Stirrings, because we admit that we don't like card selection, Ponder and Preordain and now Faithless Looting on the banned list. What is your opinion? How fair or unfair do you think Ancient Stirrings is?
So I think that Stirrings, I mean, it's no secret, right? It's the best cantrip in Modern by a very large margin. Like it's no question, right? That's just a fact. That's just a fact. However, I think that the cost in deck building is high enough that it's okay. I think that the cost of deck building is high enough that it's okay. It really helps Tron. It really helps Amulet. Even Amulet, I don't think it's in Amulet, Stirrings whiffs a lot. Like that. Let's not
Okay.
It does whiff a lot because you're oftentimes looking for like very specific cards. You're either looking for specifically an Amulet, which you only have 4 copies of,
Right.
or you're looking for specifically a bounce line, which you only have 8 copies of. So oftentimes you are either completely whiffing. You have a lot of cards that you can't get with Stirrings. That is Primetime, Pacts, all the creatures. So all that stuff, just other Stirrings, Once Upon a Time Now, even makes Stirrings even more likely to whiff. So there's a lot of ways that we can whiff. This is of course different in the Karn version. I think that Stirrings is incredible in the Karn version. Like the fact that Stirrings can find Karn the Great Creator is pretty huge for Amulet, I think. But that is, that's not the version that most people are playing nowadays. But I think that the cost in deck building is high enough, and the cards that we are getting are important enough that is still a slam dunk 4-off in Amulet, and will probably be a slam dunk 4-off in Amulet forever. But again, I think that the card is fine. I think the card is fine. I don't think it's gonna be banned or anything like that, because otherwise a lot of decks would just run it. Right, like you're just playing, like Sahili combo or like Devoted Druid combo and just jamming 4 Ancient Stirrings in there, and that's not how it works. You need to build your deck in a certain way. You need to be playing like 29 lands, or like in the case of Tron, just like 19 lands, but a lot of threats. So, right. And Stirrings can find them all, which is like the big difference between Tron and Amulet. And I think that Tron is just fine. It's a fine deck. I think Amulet it's a fine deck as well. The way that I see it is like, what would you want to be the top decks in the format? And like decks that you probably don't want to be the top decks in the format probably include something like Dredge, Hogak.
Right. Yeah.
These are decks that maybe you don't want to be the top dogs. But a deck like Amulet, I think that it's just, even if you don't like Amulet, it's always exciting to watch. And this is something that, it's just the way it is. People just like enjoy the seeing the potential of the deck, seeing these really wacky lines that you have, like a Titan, and then you just tap for 1 extra mana with thanks to the Yasusa, and then you play an explosives, then you attack, you get your lands, they untap, and you crack it in combat. Like that kind of stuff is kind of cool.
I hear a lot of hate on Tron, but I honestly don't hear almost any hate on Amulet.
Exactly,
at least not since the Summer Bloom days. Exactly.
Well, but I mean, the hate on Amulet when Summer Bloom was legal was completely justified. That deck was not okay. You were not supposed to do that stuff. Like the turn 2 kills were, or like the turn 2 Titans. I remember Tom Martell wrote an article where he was calling the pseudo kill, the turn 2 pseudo kill. Where you were just like playing a prime time on turn 2. It just happened a little bit too often. It was not okay. That was just not. It was too good for Modern, and that's fine. They really needed to ban it. But I don't know. It just feels, and I feel this from, and I say this like having played against Amulet, both in the mirror. I went through a phase where I would play a lot of John Shadow, just because I really enjoyed playing John Shadow. Back when the deck was first, when it first came,
when it beat me.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. It was actually before that, because there was
When
this
it was
guy
on the rise, yeah.
Exactly. There was this guy called Grant G-77.
G-hash, yeah.
Yeah, he was destroying everybody in Moto, and I'm like, he was streaming back then. He started streaming recently, a little bit ago as well. He was streaming a lot of limited, but I remember watching his stream and seeing all the stuff that he was doing. I'm like, this is amazing. Like this deck is so cool. So that's when I picked it up and I played a fair amount. And when you play it from the other side against Amulet, it also feels a little bit like that. Like you feel like you have a little bit of control of what's going on. If you are like thought ceasing the Amulet player and that kind of stuff. Whereas against Tron, it's just like, well, they have 3 lands and they have a Karn. Whoops, I guess that's game over. Cool. So it just feels way worse to lose to Tron for whatever reason. It's just not fun. It's just not fun. You just feel like you are getting cheesed out whenever you're playing against Tron. Against Amulet, you only do feel like you're getting cheesed out when they have the turn 2. But again, like the turn 2 happens. Mm-hmm. I think people greatly overstate how often the turn 2 kill happens. It doesn't happen that often.
I don't even know. I can't even remember the last time it's happened to me. Although I can remember a lot of times people have had 2 amulets against me, but like even then, I still don't remember turn 2 kills.
Yeah, exactly. So it does happen, but it's like, I want to say like 5% of the time, if maybe. Like I've been streaming for over a year, and I actually have like a command in my stream that is like the turn 2 command. So whenever I turn to somebody, I add to the count. And in a year of streaming, I have no idea how many matches that is. Probably like, I don't know, like 500 matches, maybe more, maybe less, but like maybe around that. I stream pretty consistently. But in that many matches, I think I have like 40-something turn 2 kills.
So what does the turn 2 kill look like?
So the turn 2 kill involves a lot of cards. First of all, you need one. Yeah, so let's go through everything. So first of all, you need one untapped land, ETB untapped land, which now thanks to Castle Garenberg, we're even playing less copies of ETB untapped lands on turn 1. So that is kind of a concession, but it's fine. All right. So ETB untapped land, bounce land that needs to be a green bounce land. 2 amulets, Azusa, Primeval Titan. That is 6 cards. Now, adding to this, that bounce land cannot be Boros Garrison, and you cannot have Boros Garrison in your hand. So that is also another big deal. And you cannot have multiples of Slayer Stronghold, Vesuva, or Sandhome in your hand. I think you can have one of them. No, you can't have any of them. Yeah, all of them need to be in your deck. So there's a lot of ifs. But if you do, if you get there, you would play your untapped land on turn 1. You would play your amulet. Your opponent will have the turn. Then you go back to your turn. You play the second amulet. Then you would play your bounce land.
Right.
You would net 4 mana because the amulets stack. Yep. Right. So you would get 4 mana. You would return the bounce land to your hand to the bounce trigger. You would play the Azusa, having 1 mana floating. You would play the bounce land again, make 4 more mana. Now you have 5. You would bounce the bounce land again. You would play the bounce land the 3rd time thanks to the Azusa, and now you have access to 9 mana. With that 9 mana, you can either use 3 to transmute if you have a Tularia West, and you can go get a Pact maybe. So you can do that. And then you have 6 mana floating to cast a Titan, or you can just cast a Titan and have 3 mana floating. Nice and easy. So you cast your Titan, you find Boros Garrison and Slayer Stronghold. They untap once. So for the first amulet, you target your Titan. They untap again, you target it again. Now your Titan is a 10/6 Trample, Vigilance, Haste.
That's right.
Yep. You attack with it, you get... You attack with it for 10, you get Sandhome Fortress of the Legion, and you get Vesuva. The Vesuva is going to copy your Boros Garrison in play. You're going to get 4 mana from the Boros Garrison and tap in twice. You're going to activate the Sun Home, and you're going to attack your opponent for 20.
Boom!
Easy.
Easy game.
Yeah. If you actually have a Titan and not... it's like what I say in the first step, when you have if you actually have a Titan and you don't need to transmute for it, you can use those three mana with the Titan trigger, you can get a Simic Growth Chamber and a Tolarian West. And you can use the 3 mana that you had floating in order to transmute that. And you can basically get a second Titan instead, if that makes sense. So we had 3 mana floating, right? We get the Bounce Land and the Simic Growth Chamber, the Tolaria and the Simic Growth Chamber with the ETB Titan trigger. We have 6 more mana now, right? 2 from the Tolaria West and tapping twice, and 4 from the Simic Growth Chamber. We bounce the Tolaria West to hand. We use those 3 mana that we had floating. We transmute for a Pact. We Pact for a Titan. We cast the Titan with exact mana. And now the second Titan can go get Boros Garrison and Stronghold, and we can haste both Titans. So now you swing for 32 instead of 20. For a good measure.
It's even more.
For a good measure. Easy.
Excellent. That's
it's
fantastic.
Good. It's fun stuff. It's fun stuff.
So thank you very much for your insights, Francisco. And for the Merfolk community out there, we're going to have Francisco's going to give us some insight into the Amulet versus Merfolk matchup. You can find that on my Patreon for all my patrons who support me there. So is there any other plugs you'd like to let everyone know how to find you, or aside from all the links we're going to give in the description below? But you check that description below for everything to find Francisco.
So you can follow me on Twitter, Twitch. I stream regularly on Twitch Monday through Thursday. Sometimes I have some Friday streams as well. That's 11 a.m. PST until about 3 p.m. or so. So you can find me on Twitch there. I upload all my streams to my YouTube channel. And as well, I'm starting to do some YouTube exclusive content. So make sure you check out fpawlusz MTG on YouTube, and you can find some YouTube exclusive content there as well. You can subscribe and get notified whenever I post new content. And I actually have a Discord if you are interested in joining some Amulet. And for my Twitch subscribers, I actually have the most comprehensive sideboard guide ever, which is what I like to call it, for any deck. Basically, it's like a 50-page sideboard guide that I update as soon as there's like metagame changes and stuff. Not only
50 pages.
It's a lot. I basically cover like the 50 top decks from MTG Goldfish, and I go really deep about how to approach every matchup. So I always say that, I will write like all the cards that you want to bring in and all the cards that you want to take out. And then I write like a wall of text for every single matchup. And so what I always say is like, even if the numbers get outdated, because, like you're updating your Titan list,
right,
and you're preparing your Titan list for facing the expected metagame that you think you will face. So even if the numbers are not exact, they're not precise for your specific list that you're running, the wall of text will be relevant regardless. And also, as I said earlier, one of my most watched videos is what's called the Mystifying Amulet Titan, which is where I go through almost 3 hours, where I just talk about all the basic interactions, all the basic cards and all that stuff. And then I made a part 2 where I talk about the different versions of the deck that you can run. And I go really deep on card choices and that kind of stuff. So all that stuff you can find in my YouTube as well.
Fantastic. All right, so this has been Nikachu with Francisco, Amulet Titan Master, talking about Amulet in Modern.